What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning into the X Button Gaming channel. As always, I'm your host, Chris. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about something a little different than I have in previous episodes. And I'm going to focus on just one of my favorite gaming series. And the reason for this being is because as of the time of this recording, 2 days from now, but by the time you guys see this, it may already be out. And that is that there is a remaster of 2 of the games from this series that I love coming out on this Friday, March 7th. And that is the Suikoden 1 and 2 remastered compilation. So I have no matter what, this is literally one of my favorite series, and I've always struggled with, I prefer to say Suikoden, but I've heard a lot of people who I believe have more knowledge on this say Suikoden. But going forward, I'm just going to say Suikoden. I'm sure that's probably wrong, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it probably does matter, at least a little bit. But anyway, this series has always meant a lot to me. So a little background on me, I guess. RPGs in general are one of my favorite genres. But that came very specifically because of a time in my life when I was young, about 13. I had a lot of very severe health issues. I actually had a brain aneurysm where I had to be inside a lot. And because I couldn't risk having my head knocked around because it could make the thing bleed. Anyway, don't need to get too much on that. The purpose of me talking about that, though, is that because I was forced to be indoors when most of my friends were starting to learn how to snowboard and skateboard and stuff, I focused even more on video games. I was always a gamer before this. Like I grew up, with a more or less a Super Nintendo. We had an NES, but I grew up with the Super Nintendo, then the 64 and the PS1. And gaming has always been in my blood. But this was a very defining moment in my life because I'd say if it wasn't for the fact that I had to be home and my parents took pity on me and probably bought me more games than they would have otherwise because I was limited as to what I could do, gaming became more my primary hobby than it ever had been before. But during this time, I appreciate them differently now, but no matter how much I might like platformers or racing games or whatever else, RPGs were what really got me through this time. At this point, I'd already played, the Pokemon games, I think came out a few years earlier, and I'd played a couple of RPGs. Earthbound and Super Mario RPG were probably my 2 earliest. But I remember I was in 7th grade, so about 13, and my good friend Nick let me borrow Final Fantasy VII. I'd never played it before, didn't know much about it, and I remember being absolutely blown away. And that game will forever be the game that changed my video game trajectory going forward, because playing Final Fantasy VII experienced this epic story, this giant open world. Because if you've played RPGs like Mario RPG and Earthbound or Pokemon, they're fantastic, but they aren't as huge in a sense. That feeling when you're playing Final Fantasy VII and you leave Midgar for the first time and you're into that open world map, that was honestly life-changing for me. I know that sounds cheesy, but it was. So from that moment on, I chased that high of role-playing games, trying to find other games that I liked as much as I liked Final Fantasy VII. And there were quite a few. I mean, historically, I've always loved Final Fantasy VIII, even to some extent more than I like 7. But one of the series that I ended up finding probably about 2 or 3 years later that really stuck with me was Suikoden. I remember I was at an EB Games, and I was talking to the employee there, whose name was also Chris, and he suggested, I asked him for a new RPG, because I'd played a bunch of stuff at this point, and he was like, have you played the Suikoden series? And I told him no, and Suikoden 4 was the newest one at the time, which I have right here. It was probably a few months old already, because I want to say it was like $20-$30, so it was on sale at that point. But I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. So I took it home, and this game, I loved this game. I absolutely loved it. And what's funny is, in hindsight, it's actually considered the worst of the series, and I see it. Having played them all, I know that it is not the best. But the specific draw for me was that there was such a large cast of characters, and so many of them had very distinct personalities. And the Suikoden games are known because each one of them has the 108 Stars of Destiny that play the central focus to these games. So when I played Suikoden 4, I was in love. I absolutely adored this game. I played through it multiple times. I knew it was the 4th one in the series, so I knew I wanted to play other games in the series. And then I found out later that they're all intertwined, historically on their timeline. They take place at different places, and Suikoden 4 is actually the furthest back. So it doesn't connect as much as some of the others with a few characters crossovers. But because of that, I'm like, I got to get into the rest of the series. And that's when I started, trying to find a copy of the first one and the second game. And that's when I realized, even back then, probably 2003-ish, that Suikoden 2 was expensive. It was over $100 at the time. And that was unheard of to me. I did not realize that games would be more expensive than what they sold for new when they came out. The idea of them increasing in value had never crossed my mind. Being a kid growing up, your parents treat games, at least for me, they treated games kind of like toys. They throw the box away, you play it when you're done. Sometimes they'd sell it and you'd get new stuff or new games. So it never had really crossed my mind too much that they were collectible as well. And that's besides the fact that even as a younger teenager, I kept the boxes to a lot of my games. Some of my Pokemon games, I still have the boxes from because I kept them. I know one of the oldest boxes that I kept back when my mom stopped forcing me to throw things away or stopped paying as much attention probably was Paper Mario for the 64. I still have that box and everything because I started keeping it. That collector's mentality was there already. But anyway, Suikoden 4 basically was the game that kickstarted my my love of not just playing video games, but collecting video games as well. So then the hunt for Suikoden 2 started. And it took me a few years to finally get it, but I stumbled across the first one at a GameStop, probably not too long after I played 4, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. At that point it was already an older game. This was the cover for anybody who hasn't seen it. I should do a case upgrade of this game at some point. This one's all beat up, but yeah, I stumbled on it at a GameStop and I was so excited, played through it, loved it. Once again, the story with the 108 Stars of Destiny, some of the characters in it are just fantastic. I'm excited to play through it again on this remaster. But yeah, like I said, it took a couple more years from that point for me to even find a copy of 2. So I played 4 first, then I played 1. Then eventually I got 3, which I also have here. And I enjoyed 3. I would say personally, it might be my least favorite of the bunch, but I do intend to go through it again at some point because it's been a few years. I haven't played it in a while. And then Suikoden Tactics came out probably 2005-ish. This is a spin-off of 4. It's a tactics game. And I was really excited for it because at this point I'm in love with the Suikoden series and I loved Final Fantasy Tactics. It's not Final Fantasy Tactics. The story isn't that good. I'd say it might be a little closer to Fire Emblem, not in story, but in the gameplay because you have the permadeath system and everything. I never finished that one. I do need to go back and play it again at some point. But I enjoyed it enough, but I remember being a little disappointed because I had higher hopes for how much I loved the series and how much I loved Tactics, and it just felt like it was kind of lacking in the story. But then in 2006, the last of the true mainline Suikoden games came out. At this point, I still hadn't played 2, but that was Suikoden 5, which this one I have in a box protector just because it's, I don't know. This is one of my favorite games, probably top 10. I've never sat down and truly made a definitive top 10 list, but I believe it would be there. This game is beautiful. I don't think there's any other word. The story is fantastic. I remember, I want to say it was IGN or Game Informer, one of those platforms gave the game a 5 out of 10. And I remember being disgusted. And they said specifically that it takes too long to get going. The beginning of the game takes 10 hours before you really get into the strong story bits. And I was just blown away by that because that's the point of the game. It is a slower start, but most people aren't playing RPGs if they don't want a strong story. And this game, the whole reason that it does have a longer start like that is because it's really helping you get to know the characters and the kingdom where you reside at the beginning. And it makes some of the main events that happen early in the game that much more impactful. It's just truly a fantastic game. I love that game to death. I look forward to playing through it again here soon. After I replay 1 and 2, I want to go through the whole series again for the first time in quite a few years. But yeah, Suikoden 5 to me is breathtaking as far as the story, the music, even the art still holds up. It has that PS2 we'll say PS2 jank, but PS2 looked pretty good. But yeah, the series as a whole I loved. But then finally, probably another year after that came out, around 2007, I finally got a copy of Suikoden 2, and that's because I was at GameStop at the time. I was working there at this point, and my boss at the time, his name was Josh, somebody was trading in a stack of games, and we didn't take PS1 games anymore. And he asked them if like he took it into something else, they'd end up getting like $20 trade credit if that worked for them. And they said, yeah, they don't care. So he did that. I ended up getting it for like $40, and I was excited. I'll even show you the receipt here. I kept it. You can't see anything because all of the ink faded off. So that's wonderful. But yeah, so finally, after like 3 years of being into the series at this point, at least 3 years, I was able to play Suikoden 2. And this game, once again, just like the fourth one blew me away, just like the first one and then the fifth one all blew me away in their own different ways. This game blew me away. The story in this game is phenomenal. You don't get stories like this very often anymore. I feel like the stakes in this game are high. I will say it has been probably 10 years since I've played through 2 for the last time. So it's been a while, maybe even more. I don't know that I've played it since I've been married, and that's been 11 years now. But if you've played Final Fantasy Tactics, I'm going back to Tactics again. The story in that game is one of the best video game stories in my opinion. And I feel like Final Fantasy Tactics and Suikoden 2 have a lot of like very similar story beats, but they do it differently. I don't know. I'm sure that this video just feels like a dude rambling about a series that he loves with very little purpose. But here's my point. This game is phenomenal. If you wanted to play this game right now on PS2 or on PS1, whether you play it on PS1, PS2, or backwards compatible PS3, it's like $200 easy. $200 for a copy, probably more than that if you want a nice one. I think it ranges $200 to $250. It's not a cheap game. But before long, here in a couple days, they're releasing a remaster with the first game and the second game on it. So you're getting $300 worth of games in a $50 compilation that they've taken the time to remaster. And I read articles about it in this last week too, which have only gotten me more excited to replay them. And that's it. So the game actually apparently started development in 2020, which I kind of think is a little interesting because it probably started development right around the time that Ayuden Chronicles Kickstarter was so successful. And Konami was like, hold on, we're sitting on money here then. But that's besides the point. So around 2020, the development of the game started. It was officially announced in 2022 that it was coming out in 2023. And I remember that because I was super excited. And I think I even posted it on my X Button Instagram. But then it was just like silence for a while. I kind of assumed that maybe it even wasn't going to end up getting released in America or something because it just went so quiet and there had been so little Suikoden love here in years. But then, yeah, so finally now they announced last year that it was coming in 2025. So at the point that this comes out, it'll have been in development for, 4.5 years at least from the time it started and the time it released. And the reason being is because they wanted to put the time in to make sure this game lived up to the original game. They did not want to release a remaster that was worse than the original versions of the game. They took the time to make sure that all of the remastering they did was up to par. I believe they got the original recording artist to redo the soundtrack, the original artist that did like the portraits of all the characters to redraw the portraits. They tried to keep it as true to the original games as possible. We're only upgrading things to bring it up to today's standards in a sense of polishing things up. So I'm extremely excited for this. It's coming out in a couple days. PS5, PS4, Xbox is actually getting a physical too, which is surprising, and the Switch as well. And this is my opportunity to implore anybody who watches this video. If you are an RPG fan and you have not played these games, do it. The first one may not hold up as well as to some as the others, but play them both because they are connected, like pretty much directly from one to the next. And if you get the 108 Stars of Destiny, if you manage to gather them all in the first game, it unlocks some stuff in the second game to make that playthrough even better towards the end of the game. So there is all the reason to play both. And I truly believe that any traditional JRPG fan, if you like turn-based RPGs with fantastic stories, you'll love it. So this is, like I said, this is one of my favorite series. And I'm excited for this because the last game that we got in this series was all the way back in 2009, and that was Suikoden Tear Crease. Was a DS game, and it was disappointing to me. I played it when it came out. I don't remember if I finished it or not, but it just felt so far removed. They still kept some of the stuff. There were still the 108 Stars of Destiny, the runes that play a ginormous part in the series, play a part in it. But some of the things, like some of the reoccurring characters, like Jean, do not make an appearance. And it just felt so far removed that it was just kind of disappointing. Having been a fan and having at that point not had a new game for 3 years, felt like, man, this is the best we got. Well, now it's been 16 years and we've had no new games. So these remasters are pretty huge. To me, they're absolutely huge. And I'm sure to a lot of other fans of the series, it's huge. But I think the best part about this is how much it'll make the series accessible to a wider audience. Because I think 1 and 2 were both available on PlayStation Network on PS3 to you could buy for $5 or $10 and download them there. But I don't think they're available anymore. They haven't been easily accessible for a long time. So I'm really hoping that this remaster will open up people's eyes to the fact that this is an absolutely fantastic series, where then the first two, the second one is probably the best in the series, even though 5th is probably my personal favorite game. 2 is like right there. So I'm hoping people see that, then they want to play the rest, and maybe we get remasters of the rest, and then hopefully they bring the universe back, because I'd love to see more in this world that they created. It is such a good world. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to gush here about one of my favorite series, and hopefully encourage some of you to take the plunge and buy these remasters on whatever console you like best. Even buy it digitally. I'm not a somebody who preaches digital, but I don't care how you buy this game. I just want to see it get sales so that we hopefully get more. And I truly believe if you like RPGs, you'll like these games, especially the second one. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'd like to know, though, if you watch this video and you've played the series, reach out. I'd love to talk to other fans of the series, and just kind of want to ride this wave of excitement I have for this remaster. And I'd love to just talk to other people who like it, people who want to know more about it. You can feel free to ask. I'll do my best. I will be playing off of memory because I haven't played them in a while, like I said. But yeah, and if anybody gets it and ends up playing it, like, I'd love to hear your thoughts as you play through it too. Like, genuinely, I'm excited for people to play these games. This is one of those examples where these games getting remade, if this makes the price of the PS1 game plummet, it's a $250 game now. If all of a sudden it's a $50 game, that would be, who cares? Like, part of the fun of collecting is the value, but this is one of those games I truly think people are buying to play, and I hope this makes it easier for that. So 2025 is looking to be a good year. This is a great start for me, and with the recent announcement of the Tony Hawk 3 and 4 remake, there's some really cool nostalgia pulls this year, not to mention some of the new games coming out this year too. So once again, if you haven't, please do like and subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to put out content on a more regular basis, and I would love to hear from you. I do my best to respond to any comments I get on any of the videos I post. There is also a Discord if you want to join that as well. But thank you for watching, and remember to always press X to continue.